Talbot is Britain's last great steelworks. Later this year, it's due to be closed, at least for a while. Either way, steelmaking, as it has been done for generations, will disappear.
The two campaigns who fought over Brexit provided two different visions. Now that Brexit is here, we are able to show that Vote Leave lied about what Brexit meant for Britain. Time and time again, we can prove this. And there is no better example than looking at Tata Steel in Port Talbot. You may not know, but I am actually from Wales. I grew up just down the road from Port Talbot. My friends, many of them worked in the steelworks, and I lived through Margaret Thatcher's decimation of industry in the 1980s. Indeed, it is why I left Wales and got a job in London. And it is also why I was so vehemently against Brexit, because it was obvious to me that putting up trade barriers to your biggest market was always going to ensure that the manufacturing sector would suffer really badly. And that is exactly what is happening. And the reason I want to talk about Port Talbot is because I feel passionately about my home. And I'm also very perturbed about the fact that the snake oil salesmen who sold Brexit are now hoping to win seats in Wales over the coming years. And that really concerns me, because electing the Reform Party, who were the Brexit Party, who were UKIP, to power will make things a heck of a lot worse than they are already. And that's why I want to look at what has gone on in the past and what is going on in the present, so that we can show who is telling you the truth.
The support of the working class. I think Nigel Farage is a fraud, and I'm sorry, I know he's a colleague of yours, but I think he's a fraud, and I think basically he tries to breed division in our communities. And what this country needs is to bring people together, that shared sense of national purpose, to rebuild our public services, to get the economy growing. And I don't think that Nigel, I'm afraid, represents the people of Clacton or working class people effectively.
And whilst many people are very angry when they think about Tony Blair because of the Iraq War, I would urge you to listen to him. He is by far the best Prime Minister we have ever had, certainly in my lifetime. And he speaks sense on so many levels.
Not just Britain, but lots of Western democracies face today is populism. And I would say, tell me if you think differently, I would say populism is broadly that mode of politics in which charismatic leaders claim to represent the will of the people against a ruling elite. In your view, should populism be, as George Orwell said of saints, always considered guilty until proven innocent?
First of all, you've got to distinguish between wanting to do things that are popular, which most politicians do, and populism. I define populism as exploiting a grievance rather than solving it, as riding the anger rather than providing the answer. That's how I define it. But, other people can define it differently. So I don't think that every politician that people talk about as a populist, necessarily all the things they say are wrong. And if they've got solutions to the grievances, they may be right. The populists, though, will often, they exploit the grievance rather than try and deal with it, because the grievance is what gives them traction on the political system. And in my view, I feel this very, very strongly today. The challenge of democracy and the answer to populism is efficacy. It's effective delivery of change. And in the end, whether you're a populist or not a populist, if you've got an issue that is troubling for people, the question is, what's the solution? And the people that have the solution will, in the end, succeed.
3 seats.
And Brexiteers like Nigel Farage in the last couple of days has blamed the closure of the steelworks on net zero hysteria or climate policy. How much truth is in that?
None is a simple answer. Why is it that the Netherlands plant at IJmuiden and Tata's operations elsewhere in the EU are not being affected, and yet it's the UK's operations, and particularly those in Wales, that are taking the brunt of the redundancies? We've seen what's happened within the EU, we've seen what's happened in the UK. Why the difference?
Carwyn Jones, he was the First Minister of Wales from 2009 to 2018. He oversaw all of the transition period. Post-Brexit, he oversaw the major meetings that happened at Tata. So this is the truth about why that plant has closed down.
In 2016, there was certainly a change in terms of the UK government's activity around Tata. Pre the Brexit referendum, they were very active. When you leave one of the world's biggest markets, it's inevitable that you will not have the same ability to export unless you put in place a series of arrangements that enable you to do as you did before. That hasn't happened in the UK. It is inevitable that if there are barriers put up between one market and another, that's not going to help somebody selling into that second market, and that's what we've seen recently, of course. I think the uncertainty surrounding Brexit, the uncertainty in terms of the future.
Wales is at home in Europe, and Europe is at home in Wales. 500 companies from other EU countries have their base in Wales. I don't want those companies to feel they're no longer welcome and to see them up sticks to Italy and Spain. I don't want to put up barriers for companies paying Welsh workers a good wage, giving them apprenticeships and investing in our young people. What kind of future do we want for our children and our grandchildren? What kind of Wales do we want? The choice is between pulling up the drawbridge, becoming isolated with devastating consequences, or looking outwards with confidence, working with others.
We may be told that if we weren't in the European Union, trade would cease, jobs would be lost, we'd finish up somehow living in caves. These arguments generally are made by the same people who said if we didn't join the euro, we'd be ruined. And in my experience, these arguments are made by people who've never worked in trade or international business. Yes, I accept Brussels and the EU has been fantastic for career politics and for civil servants. But I don't believe it's given any benefit to ordinary working people whatsoever.
We know that there are big companies, the length and breadth of Wales, who say to us it's important to be a member of the EU. I go out and I look to bring investment into Wales. We've had the best investment figures for the past 30 years in Wales. And I can tell you, the companies that I speak to say it's really important we have access to the single market and that you're members of the EU, because we see Wales as our base for the EU. Now, what you're saying is that those people's views are not important.
Well, can we just get facts here? And you're quite right to talk about Airbus in Flintshire. It's very important. Not by the way just important, not just important for jobs in Flintshire, but actually rather important for Airbus, because they make the wings. If they didn't make the wings, there wouldn't be any aeroplanes. They are interdependent. And in the modern world, the global world, we are increasingly interdependent. And the chief executive of Airbus last summer said he has no intention of pulling manufacturing out of Britain if we voted to leave the European Union, and they are the facts. And stop trying to scare people.
Yeah, let's have a debate about immigration, but let's not pretend that the EU has anything to do with this. And ask yourself this. If we were members of the EU, why would France continue to pay for those who are in camps in Calais and elsewhere? They just let them through. Why on earth would they do that for us if we weren't members of the European Union? Would it be in our interest to turn our backs on our European partners? Or isn't it better to work together and find a European solution to what is a European challenge?
But to have an Australian-style point system where we can choose who comes to Britain from anywhere in the world, we can forbid people with criminal records, we can stop benefits.
You won't know they have records or not. You're going to pull out the European arrest warrant.
And we'll take people that speak English and integrate into our communities. That surely is the best policy of the lot and the biggest benefit of leaving the European Union.
3 senior members of the new cabinet told the BBC's Panorama programme very recently that if Labour does not keep its promises, if it doesn't deliver, voters in this country will be backing populists instead. How right are they?
Yeah, I mean, backing populists or backing any alternative. If you don't deliver, but they put you out in the end. I mean, and that, by the way, is an entirely rational democratic response.
In terms of the theories as to why populism seems in the ascendant, one of the theories is, in a sense, a direct challenge to you and your mode of politics. And it's that people like you didn't fully understand at the time how globalization would create losers. So you said in 2005 of globalization, I think it was in your conference speech, I hear people say we have to stop and debate globalization.
You might as well debate whether autumn should follow summer. They're not debating it in China and India. They're seizing its possibilities in a way that will transform their lives and ours.
But isn't the truth that the globalization which you championed for understandable reasons, in a very different era. But that globalization robbed millions of people of their agency, and it changed their communities in ways they don't like.
Did it? What, globalization did that?
A lot of people might think that.
First of all, people like myself have never argued for a single moment that you should just let globalization happen. I mean, we introduced a minimum wage, made massive investment in public services, reformed our public services. We kept our economy strong. We dealt with issues that were of real difficulty for the public, and we invested in the public infrastructure to do that. We didn't just let globalization happen, but globalization as a force, let's be very clear, globally, it's lifted more people out of poverty than ever before in human history, ever before. The reason why life expectancy today is way above what it was 50 years ago is as a result of globalization. If we end up, by the way, backtracking on globalization, putting up barriers to trade, ending up making it harder for people to trade and interact with each other, we're going to slow growth. We're going to slow those things that have actually kept inflation low until very recently, and we're going to do ourselves a lot of damage. So globalization, misunderstand this, it's driven by people in the end, and it's driven by technology.
Hang on a second.
Making difficult decisions is a key part of leadership, and we've seen in recent years Rishi struggle, Boris often not able to make a decision with any coherence, and Liz Truss oblivious to it. When you look back on the 14 years of the Tories, do you see crucial leadership errors?
The best way to describe it maybe is to say, one point in the book, I say the right relationship between politics and policy is policy first and politics second. And what I mean by that is, you first of all work out the right answer. I mean, if you look at any of the leaders that have changed,
I get the theory, but I want to come on to just the literally, because the person who actually is in the chair of power matters. What happened in the last 14 years with these leaders?
We basically had politics first and policy second. So you work out what's our political, what do we want to say politically, and then you construct a policy around it. And what you end up with doing, if you do that, is first of all you end up changing the right order of things. You end up chasing after shifts in public opinion and responding to them rather than leading them. And you end up with short-term decisions that have no long-term coherence.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, and I think that is what happened.
And what was the damage?
Well, I think the damage in the end, the best description of the damage is when Keir became Prime Minister in July. He was the 6th Prime Minister in 8 years since the Brexit referendum. And you can't run a country like that. You can't succeed like that. How can you? When I ended my time in 2007, I was the 3rd Prime Minister in almost 30. And there have been a lot of continuity of policy. The other thing that I think is really important is it takes a long time to change a country. And we had, I had a difficult decision to make about the degree to which I was going to undercut the Thatcher and John Major inheritance. And I decided that in terms of the economy, in terms of things like, the reduction in the top rate of tax, the privatization of industries, the trade unions being put within a framework, I was going to leave that undisturbed because I thought it was right for the economy. But we would rebuild the public realm and modernize the country around, things like the minimum wage, gay rights, devolving power, Mayor of London, and so on. So we had the country ended up with pretty much almost 30 years of quite coherent policy towards business, which is one of the reasons why, investment was strong. And on the day I left office, I think we were $2 to the pound. In the subsequent years, we've zigzagged.
What did Brexit do for immigration?
Well, what we did, which is absolutely extraordinary, is we ended up stopping a whole lot of young, often single Europeans coming and working here in the hospitality sector. Now we've swapped out what were younger, usually single people coming in from Europe to work in our hospitality sector and other sectors, technology sector, And we swapped that for much increased immigration from Asia and Africa.
So did Brexit increase immigration and not bring back control to the borders, as was famously promised?
Well, that's been the result. I mean, I understand it wasn't the intention, but the result is we have higher levels of immigration and high levels of people bringing dependents into the country. We just need to think how we repair the relationship. And then in time, we've got to think as a country of where do we fit in the world. I mean, one of the things that gives a country energy and appetite for facing all the challenges is as they know where they fit. And, I constantly say to people, and I say it in the book, by the middle of this century, you're going to have 3 superpowers that are each one of them more powerful than any of the other countries by a long way. You're going to have America, you're going to have China, and you're going to have India, probably India. All other countries are going to be small in comparison to any of these 3. So if you're Germany or Italy or France or the UK, or you're Indonesia or the Philippines...
So we're weakened?
Yeah, there's no doubt we've weakened ourselves. We've just got to repair it.
And by repairing, does that mean having youth mobility? These are early steps?
Personally, I think youth mobility within Europe would be a good thing for us, but the government's got to take a view on that. And it's clear that this government's going to be much more open to working with Europe, but you've got to take this step by step. And people, I don't think, want to go back and revisit the whole Brexit issue again. Certainly not in this time. Maybe in later times they do, but who knows?
Port Talbot is Britain's last great steelworks. Later this year, it's due to be closed, at least for a while. Either way, steel making, as it has been done for generations, will disappear. Could be devastating for this community. Steel, the metal from which it is made.
The danger is you've got these communities in Wales that feel very let down and betrayed, particularly around the mining communities in South Wales.
And potentially with the steelworks in Port Talbot.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe it the other day. I think it was on Friday. The last ship came in to Port Talbot to deliver the stuff to the steelworks. I saw a photograph of it yesterday online, and it sort of took my breath away. Yeah. I was doing some filming down at a cafe down by the docks in Port Talbot the other day, and it's sort of on an industrial estate, and a lot of people who work in the steelworks come into that cafe, and the ladies who work there said, "Oh, we've had men just sitting at these tables just weeping." Right. And she said that, and I could see the blast furnaces. There's 2 blast furnaces just off in the distance there. She said that one's closed down already, and that one's closing down in a week's time, and the last ship is coming in on Friday.
We need this industry because if they take the industry away from us, then Port Talbot as a town will suffer. Ebervale done it. They closed Ebervale. There's nothing there now. There's nothing in Ebervale. There's no town, no socialising. There's nothing at all. It's just barren. I just see it as, rape of the working class.
And even though I've known this is coming for a long time, I had to just go and have a little walk. I was so, hit by it. This sort of gut punch. And it's the closest I can come to what it must have been like during, when the mines were all shutting down, and, just how it affects communities. Now you've got at the moment you've got very, very upset people. You can have very angry people as well, moving on from here if they don't feel like they're being given the support they should have.
Do you believe the assurances that Tata and the government are giving in terms of the transition?
Well, in talking to people at home, they're like, well, that's it. It's done. It's over. I mean, there's nothing. It's all finished. So I kept saying to them, but what about the retraining? Well, no. Well, that's just for the Tata employees. The contractors are not getting anything. And the idea that there's something's going to replace that. I mean, talk to the generation that are older than those guys and say, well, do you remember when the reskilling came after the mines closed? Well, there wasn't a lot of that either.
Well, what we're actually doing in Port Talbot, or what Tata want to do, is to stop production for 3 years. And so the knock-on effect of that is the loss of employment for 2,800 people. We understand we got to go to the greener future. We were ready for that. We had plans in place for that. But unfortunately, Tata have ignored them plans.
You've got a sort of tinderbox, really, in these sort of areas where people are frustrated and angry and grieving at the moment in Port Talbot, and you look at what the political options are for you, and they're quite limited, I think, in terms of the kind of change or the kind of representation that people want. And that is the danger, that someone comes along who offers, rightly or wrongly, whether you believe them or not, obviously, but offers some kind of radical opposition to what's going on. And people are going to be tempted by that.
If this transition isn't managed properly, it will be completely devastating for this town, completely devastating for the whole of South Wales. And that is leaving aside the nationally important strategic questions about steel making, about supply chains and so on. It speaks to Westminster's typical insularity that it is not higher up the agenda.